Hello and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, the Sky High and Fly Guy, and today I just want to rant a little bit. We are getting close here in Southern California to the state meet. We have one more week of qualifying before state finals next week up at Buchanan High School in the middle of California, Fresno. So this weekend we have the CIF Masters meet, which is going to pit the top 18 jumpers and ties, both men and women, against each other for the right to go to state. I believe the number is six, top six, and or if you hit the state qualifier. For the boys, that height is 6'6". For the girls, that height is 5'6". So there could be more. 2019, which was a banner year for the Sky High and Fly Jump Lab, we had three athletes go to state, and two of them managed to get on the podium. Jack Wiseman, who went on to jump at UC San Diego and jump over 7 feet down there. He jumped 6'9" at that meet and came in third. And then Aiden Garnett, who has gone on to some little renown at Utah Valley. He jumped 7 feet as a freshman there after jumping 6'7" to take sixth at state. He jumped 7 feet there his very next year and won the WAC conference as a freshman. So that was a pretty good year in the history annals there. Kyle Jenkins, who just this year jumped 7'3" plus at Cal State Long Beach. He was the number 3 guy on the list there, and he made it to the final but didn't place. So, but the other two were seniors, and Kyle was a junior. He came back the next year and I think would have placed pretty well at state. He jumped 6'10" early that season, first meet outdoor, and then COVID hit. So we lost that whole season. But that was a stinking nightmare. Anyway, bad time in the world history. So today, first time in a while, we look like we might be sending some people back. And today, actually, I had the privilege of working with the young jumpers from San Pedro High School, which is in the LA City section. I've been doing a lot of work in the southern section and even some work up north. One of the top kids from Sky High and Fly Jump Lab is Kate Hemesath from, she's up in the Fresno, Sacramento area. And she's a 5'6" jumper and should make it to state this week. We're hoping. And then, but the San Pedro kids are in the city section, and the city section is only going to send 3. So I was at their meet today, and they managed to place Derek and Elias were both in that competition, and they were one of 2 of the 5 guys that made 6'2". Now Derek had 1 miss, and Elias had 2 at that height. And then at 6'4", they both took really good jumps at that, but neither of them made it. But then Derek ended up taking third by making 6'2" on his second. And since they send 3, he's going to get to go to state. So we've got our first state finalist, if all holds up, going from San Pedro High School to state. And then today's Thursday. So on Saturday, we will be going back to Moore Park for the CIF Southern Section Masters meet, where we have Nate Baca, who just jumped 6'10" last week, a huge PR. He double PR'd last week to win CIF Division 1. Put his name on notice, as he wants to be a player at state, obviously. And so he stands a pretty good chance. He will be there as he should be sitting in the top seed. There were a couple other guys that cleared 6'8" last weekend, but Nate got 6'10", got 6'8" and 6'10". Tyler Molinowski jumped 6'6" again, so he stands a real good chance, either in the top, whatever, and or by jumping 6'6", because I think he's made that one 2 or 3 times now. That is it on the boys' side. Then on the girls' side, we have Lydia Lynn from Yorba Linda. She jumped 5'2" again last week, 2 or 3 times this year. At CIF Prelim, she made 5 feet and 5'2", both on her third jump to squeak in. And then last week, she jumped 5'2" on her first and had no trouble making the final for the Masters at 5'2". And we also have Riley Johnson and Juliet Iniguez from Redondo in that competition. And also Megan Whitty, who did some work with us earlier this year. She's at Mater Dei. So we've got some athletes that we've trained, done some training with, doing a lot with some, done a little with some others. And they are in the mix this weekend. So we're going to talk about the idea behind qualifying. If you're a high jumper out there or a coach and you have gotten yourself to a big meet and it's a qualifier. Qualifying is really a weird animal because, you're keyed up, you're excited, you want to compete, and basically they're just going to cut the field from a big number to a small number. So the first time I remember doing this was my junior year at Millikan High School, where I'd made it to CIF and there were 36 or more kids in Division Four. At that time, Division Four used to be the big division. Then now they go one, two, three, four the other way. So it'd be D1 now. But, Millikan, we had a big school. We're amongst all the other big schools, and there were 36 kids there. And I'll tell you what, I had to jump every bit of 6'7" to come in the top nine to come back the next week. And so that was basically a qualifier, right? They didn't finish. They jumped us until there were only nine left. And then the next week we had the final. Now, the final back then, they would throw everybody back together. All four divisions had nine people. We're back to 36. And in its own way, it was like another qualifying meet in that they took the top 12. I think it was nine at the time. Now they're talking about 12. I believe back when I was jumping, it was nine. They took the top nine. It used to be one for every lane of the track, right? So they took nine, and then the top five were going to go. So it was a much more select field. Now my junior, I didn't know any of that because I didn't jump well at CIF finals. Once I made it in with the 6'7" jump, I think I was 6'4" the next week. I was deer in the headlights, right? So that is something else we can talk about one of these times. The first time you step up to a big competition, how do you react? Some people just seem to be unconscious and it doesn't matter where they are. They just jump great. Other people, maybe it takes a little acclimatization to get used to it. That was definitely the case for me, both at Arcadia, my junior year, and CIF finals. Because the next years when I came back, I fully expected to do well when I was there. The other times I think I was hoping I would do well, but I wasn't really sure. And that's not a good mindset for a high jumper. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, how do I prepare for this? Because I think ideally you're not always going to let your jumper go crazy. I've seen it work both ways. I've seen it work to an athlete's advantage and disadvantage. What I mean is this: when you're jumping to qualify, you have a bigger goal in mind. Okay. You want to qualify for state at this Masters meet. Now, the bar is going to start for the women at 5'2". It's going to go 5'2", 5'4", 5'6". Okay. It will be done for the most part at 5'6", I believe. I believe there may be more than six girls over 5'6". At that point, the top whatever would be set. Now, there would be no point to have them jump it off because 5'6" is your automatic qualifier. Now, if they get the bar from 5'4", and say there's 15 girls that make 5'4", okay, some on the first, some on the second, some on their third jump, that automatically is setting itself up to break ties. But you can't assume that anybody's just going to miss. Somebody that missed twice at 5'4" could turn around and make 5'6" on their first jump. So we put the bar to 5'6", and you just jump it out and see what happens for both reasons. For all the tiebreakers at 5'4", and also for, the fact that 5'6" is the automatic. And the boys is going to go the same way. It's going to go 6'2", 6'4", 6'6". Now, if they're in at 6'6", you can continue to jump. And I've had that work both ways. Like I said, back in 2018, we had Kevin Schmidt. Kevin, beloved here on the program, should get him on a podcast one of these times, was the first really big client that I had at the Sky High and Fly Jump Lab. And he made it all the way to state from Los Alamitos High School, where he jumped 6'9" at his league finals, turned around and jumped 6'8", I believe, at the Masters meet. Now, here was the problem. At the Masters meet, I told him, cut it. We're done. He had a long season. Just a few weeks before at the Mount Sac meet, he had come limping out of the pit after jumping 6'2". And I'm like, what's wrong with you? He's like, my shins are killing me. I'm like, oh, good. Thanks for telling me. You're done. Let's rest. And that was my mindset getting through the Masters. As soon as he jumped 6'6" and we knew he was in, I said, hey, let's shut it down right here. Unfortunately, his coach wanted him to avenge something. I didn't understand at the time, but he wanted him to keep jumping. So he jumped 6'8", second attempt, I think, and then made three attempts at 6'10". Now, okay, I get it, but we've just had a 6'8". We had a 6'9", then a 6'8", and then he's taking jumps at three extra jumps at 6'10". And I'm like, it's been a long season. I wanted to save those jumps for the next week because they would have come in handy. Turned out the next week we had a tough week, and Kevin did not. He no-highted, did not make the final. So in that particular instance, I didn't like it. Um, Now I don't remember Kevin doing any other events either. Very next year, Jack Wiseman put in the same situation with a lower height. They had lowered the height from 6'6" to 6'4" that year. And I don't know how that all works, but that's what the automatic qualifier was. And out of the 12 guys that were in that final, 11 of them made 6'4". And so they were all going to state. But they did keep jumping. So once they'd made 6'4", they went to 6'6". So you can keep going. And Jack jumped 6'6", then he jumped 6'8", which was a new PR because he had jumped 6'7" a few weeks before that. And then he jumped 6'10". And that was big. Now, in Jack's case, he hadn't jumped as high as Kevin as early, and he had been around the block a few times. He hadn't made it to state yet, but he'd had a pretty productive 3 years where he jumped 6'6" a bunch of times and maybe a little bit more experience than Kevin. I don't know. Kevin had jumped higher at that point, but I didn't feel as bad about letting Jack go for whatever reason. I thought he was more ready or more rested or I don't know what, but decided to let Jack go and he jumped 6'10". So, and it served him well because when he went to state the next week, I wasn't thinking, oh, he's flat. I think it really bolstered his confidence. Kevin had the advantage of having jumped 6'9" already and thinking he could jump 6'10" or 6'11" or 7 even. Jack didn't know that yet. So jumping 6'8" was a nice PR. And he did one of those things where you get a big PR, like kind of like Nate Baca just did. He made 6'8" on his second jump and then made 6'10" on his first. Like, boom, it was easy for whatever reason. The pressure's off. Nobody's expecting you to double PR, right? So uh, in that particular instance, it worked out that Jack continued to jump. Kyle Jenkins also jumped with him. Kyle made 6'8" that week and almost made 6'10" to match. And I believe one of the jumpers from San Marcos jumped 6'10" with Jack. So they were all kind of, comparing what they could do and kind of getting ready for state. And most of those guys continued to jump well at state. I believe all of those guys I just mentioned made the final. So, it just depends on the year. Next week for Nate Baca, I would be like, we've already discussed it with the parents and said, hey, we need to make sure that when he jumps 6'6" again, I think he should be done because he's got to do the triple jump as well. And yeah, you got to play it smart. So that's his strategy there. But anyway, we're looking forward to it coming up. It's 2 days away. And I would just want to go back again on record and say that we need to get better coverage of these events. I'm so sick up and fed, as we would say. I just am so tired of not being able to see the high jump from a decent place, right? Off the track, up in the stands, blah, 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 trying to figure out what's going on. Everybody can see a race from a distance for the most part. High jumps really tell. If you're high up in the stands, looking down, you can't tell how high they're jumping. It's a terrible experience. And I would love to promote the high jump more. I would love to promote all the jumps. All the field events need more attention. They need more coverage for whatever reason, from time out of mind. It's been mentioned on this podcast before. Ever since I was a senior at UCLA and they started putting, our dual meets on prime ticket and showing every lap of the men's 10,000 and showing none of the high jump. I don't have anything against the 10,000 meter runners. They train hard and they deserve their moment in the sun. But for crying out loud, 32 laps of running around circles and no high jump, it's not equal by any means. And anybody that knows anything about those sports, all the throws, all the jumps, is that takes a while. It's not a race. You don't compete everybody at one time and then it's over. It's a drawn out thing. I said, well, you're long jumping now. You got to run down the runway jump and we got to measure and then we send somebody else, right? It's very sequential. And that brings in some drama, some suspense, all the suspense in the 100 meters is over in 10 seconds, that's it. You get to watch it like, oh, wow, that was fast. Okay. Now what? Now let's wait for another race. I say in between those races, if you're into them, go watch the high jump. There should be cameras down there. should be showing them up on the big screen, and there should be some really good camera angles, which I'd be happy to recommend, and some expert commentary, by whoever. So this weekend, I'm going to announce this here, and we're going to post this later. This rant is going to go up on the YouTube channel. We are going to Alan Hankel and myself. Alan Hankel was my coach my last year in '92, trying to make the Olympic trials. He coached Doug Nordquist. And those of you that know your jumpers know Doug Nordquist's name. He jumped 236, jumped 7.8 3/4 on a cadaver reconstructed left knee, which is pretty amazing. And he was in the '84 Olympic Games and came in fifth. So Doug was very high level. Alan's a very high level coach. He's coached athletes, obviously, that have competed in Olympics and NCAA finals and trials and all kinds of fun stuff. So we are going to do a live broadcast, a live reel or Instagram podcast broadcast of the Masters event, as close as we can to the field, and interviewing hopefully right before as many of the high jumpers and coaches and personality types that are down there. There's all kinds of, I am always bumping into people that I used to compete against back in the day. And this is back in the day is a long way back, right? So, my senior year was 1986. This is 40 years later in 1920, 2026. Wow. So yeah, 40 years later, sometimes I still bump into my old UCLA teammates come walking by, some people that I jumped against, that I've coached against for a long time. So, who have you got this year? That happens a lot. Oh yeah, I saw your guy last week do this. Okay. So we're going to get a lot of that action and, try to keep a running dialogue. The good thing is, CIF, thank you. They were very smart in having it be two separate events instead of having the men's and women's high jump go right next to each other like they did last week, which works. It's just kind of hectic if you have more than one kid out there to watch, which I did. So I had to do some running back and forth, right? Fortunately, they weren't on opposite ends of the field. So at least the pits were side by side. But this week, they're just going to go men first, women to follow. And that will make things a lot easier for me anyway. But I think also maybe a little less hectic and a little less traffic out on the high jump runways because, if you're on the right side of the left pit, and the left side of the right pit. Wait, no. The left side of the left pit and the right side of the left side of the right. There's a crossover there. Okay. And that's where it can be problematic. Someone's been called up. Somebody else gets called up from the other side. They come walking out and they come walking right into your way as you're getting ready to jump or, whatever. You got to wait, and you're saying to the ref, hey, can I wait? I don't want you to start my clock yet. It's just, let's get rid of all that, right? So very wisely, they decided to put the boys first and let the girls follow. That order would not have mattered to me one way or the other. I don't think it's going to be too hot this weekend. It's supposed to be only 75 or something like that, and should be nice. So, and again, the game is the same. Okay, it's going to be a qualifier only. Some people may decide to go for it. I'm going to try to talk some of mine not in that, but then, if Tyler Molinowski jumps 6'6" again and makes it and wants to take his jumps at 6'8", I would probably say, yeah, let's go because, he's working at getting over 6'8", so he's working on his timing. So it would probably be a good thing for Tyler. I don't think he's going to have any trouble recovering. He hasn't complained of anything this season. No bad knees, ankles, shins, So it'll probably be okay to let him go. And hopefully we get our athletes in. But it's basically stay alive. First of all, stay alive. For the ones that are a little bit lower down in the order, if I just snuck in to the Masters meet, by making 5.2 or whatever, second or third jump, or even first jump. 5.2 is a little bit lower. There were some girls that made 5.4, and there were some girls that made 5.6, and at least one girl made 5.8. So there is a little bit of a pecking order that's been established, but again, we're still looking just for the top six and or 5.6s. Now, you just don't know who's going to step up to the plate. And again, I want to give props where props are due for CIF. I like this idea of having not just 12, but 18. Even if it takes an extra 20 minutes or a half an hour on both competitions, so what? These kids have been working hard all year. And if they get a chance to get the taste of that meet. Maybe they're a bottom qualifier. Maybe I snuck in by making 6'2" with my third jump. That's all it took for the guys, and same for the girls. Got 5'2". I made that. I didn't make 5'4", but it was a good meet. They placed at CIF, right? And then now they get to jump at the Masters meet. That's exciting. And the bar's still up, and maybe somebody has a day and makes a couple bars they haven't made before, and all of a sudden you're off to state. And it wasn't even on the table. It wouldn't have been on the table last year, if it was just 12 instead of 18. And they actually did 18 plus ties. So it's pretty cool. I like the opportunity. Who wouldn't? My theory back when, coaching at particular high schools where we had, league championship meets and all that, when they used to score it, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 1 or something like that, six places. Well, my thought was I want to qualify as many people as I can. If we can sweep, man, I've never done it. We did it one time, went like first, second, fourth, fifth, and sixth, or something like that. Or first, second, third, fifth, and sixth. I forget. We got like 26 points one time. And that was cool, and exciting and all that. What was my point with bringing that up? But as far as, getting to the state meet, getting the job done, once you get through all that stuff, the rest of it is just kind of jump to survive, jump and continue to jump. If you keep making bars, it doesn't have to be pretty. Now, for the ones that are used to jumping 5'6", 5'8", it's a little bit more rarefied air, but there are a few up there. Same thing with the 6'6" and above crowd, right? Because sometimes there's guys just nudging up 6'2", 6'4", they've been trying to make 6'6", and all of a sudden, boom, they make 6'6" once, right? It's all about timing, and sometimes it does come down to misses. Now, if there are not a lot of people making 6'6" or 5'6" this weekend, then the misses are magnified. Okay. If there are a lot of people making 5'6" and 6'6", the misses won't matter at all because you're in. There's 10 guys that make 6'6", they all go, and nobody's going to care which jump you made it on. So it's only if there's not a lot of automatic qualifiers that you're going to be looking back going, oh man, if I'd have made 5'4" on my first jump instead of my second, even I might have been in the top, whatever. So it's weird. You got to play both games at once. So we're looking forward to that. Like I said, stay tuned. I will be posting. I got to figure out some details. I'm happy to take suggestions because I'm a dinosaur when it comes to this stuff, but I really want to do this broadcast from the event live. Alan and myself, I've known Alan for many years. He's my coach all these years, was at my wedding. And, we're just going to have fun, try to promote both track and field, but more importantly, the high jump, which is, where I live and breathe, and, have fun with it and, try to do what I feel like they should be able to do all the time, which is have expert commentary, multiple camera angles. We'll do the best we can, because I'm sure they're not going to let us down onto the field. That's one of our goals. One of my goals is to have this become well enough known where they go, hey, why don't you go down and, we'll get the Instagram crowd that you can bring and your YouTube followers and whatever. When you put out this live podcast, everybody liked it. So we would like to get some of that, attention on this meet. It's a big meet, and here in Southern California, we're one of the, what do we call it? A stronghold or, a huge breeding ground of talent. Here there's Texas, there's California, there's Louisiana, there's, no offense to all the other states. There's plenty of fine athletes in all the other states, but for some reason, right, Florida and LSU, Louisiana, and Texas, California tend to have some more, right? We have great training weather, all that kind of stuff kind of adds up. A lot of the other states in the union are fighting weather, all the way through the fall. Once the fall stops being muddy and turns into rain and not in, sorry, stops turning from muddy to snowy, they're stuck indoors, I started realizing that when we were at meets out here my first year at Vanguard, and we'd get to some of the last chance qualifier meets and we'd see all these pasty white people come from back east. They're like, dude, we haven't seen the sun in months. They'd be laying out at the meet going, yay, the sun's out, So it is definitely an advantage that some states have in their weather all year round. They get to train more outdoors, and sometimes that could result in better marks or whatever. So, all right, that's going to be about it. I'm going to wrap it up, but thanks for listening. We are going to be live this Saturday at the CIF Masters meet for the Southern section. There are other ones going on. There's going to be one for the San Diego section. They're going to have their own version. There's the city one that I went to today, City CIF. And then there are farther up north still to come. There's only 18 of the spots go, I would say, what, Santa Barbara down. And then from Santa Barbara up, there's another 18. And how they break that up, I really don't know in all these years. We have worked with a few athletes from up there, but it isn't quite as deep. There are some outstanding jumpers every year come from the north, and to many times that we don't know who they are until they beat us. Maurice Crumby, I don't even remember where he jumped in high school, what city. I didn't see him until I was a senior jumping at the Sunkist Invitational. Um, just and jumping with a broken hand that I got in football. He was already a state champ, I think, and had jumped over 7 feet. So I knew about him only because I went to the Sunkist meet. The coverage didn't used to be anywhere near what it is now. Nobody would know anybody. Um, no internet, none of that stuff. We had to read the newspapers. And then John Morris, who jumped at Cal, he was up there. I didn't know who John Morris was. I wouldn't have had any idea. I think the only reason I know that he was there was that we ended up being the same years at UCLA, and he went to Cal, and of course it turned out he was a Northern boy, so he'd gone somewhere up there, and he was in that state final. So my senior year, when I jumped 6'8" at the prelim to make the final, it was me and Crumby and John Morris and a bunch of others that I knew from down here. And so the next day I got run over by a truck again, beaten by the slow to recover bug. I always needed at least one day, man. Back-to-back days were hard for me, carrying too much weight. So anyway, that's going to do it here on another episode of Raise the Bar. We've got one in the books, and our boy Derek from San Pedro is going to state. And then in 2 days, we're hopefully going to stock up the car with some more athletes going up to state. Hopefully, they'll be joined by Kate Amasath from up north, and we'll have a party, a Raise the Bar Sky High and Fly Jump Lab party. Until next time, this is Troy Haynes, the Sky High and Fly guy, signing off. Have a good one.